So welcome to day three, everyone. So today we'll have a session on fundraising run by Genevieve Marshall, who is the OAD fellow working on fundraising. She used to be the IEU fundraiser, and she has tons of experience in fundraising for a number of organizations. And in the second half, we will hear from some of the past projects, and it's an opportunity for all of you to ask questions. So we'll keep that very informal, very casual. So please stop at any time and ask questions in the second half. So Genevieve, maybe you can introduce yourself briefly before you start the presentation.
Yep. Hi, everybody. I do have a brief introduction on my presentation as well, which I pre-recorded. So, but it's lovely to be here, and thank you all for having me. And yeah, if there's hopefully some chances to ask some questions after the presentation, I think. And yeah, I'm going to start sharing my screen. Just to give you a brief overview of what we'll be discussing. Sorry, it's not, I don't know why that's not working, but let me press play and hopefully that will work. Hello everyone, my name's Genevieve and I'm going to be taking you through the fundraising session today for the OAD projects.
Yeah, that was fine.
I am an OAD fellow based remotely in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. I used to be head of fundraising for the IAU, supporting Professor Evina van Dijk during her presidency of the IAU. I've got 25 years experience in the non-profit and grant making sectors, working across high value fundraising teams and non-profit leadership. Just to give you a brief overview of what we'll be discussing in the next half an hour, we'll be firstly looking at what is fundraising, what is a theory of change, how you demonstrate impact, monitoring, evaluation and learning, and why that's so relevant to fundraising. We'll be looking at messaging and defining the ask, various income types that are available to you in private fundraising, some of the key actions you need to take, and then there's opportunity to ask questions and have a discussion in the second half. So what is fundraising? I think there's a lot of various definitions out there. Typically what we talk about now when it comes to non-profit organisations is income generation, which is a much broader picture. We're going to look at that in a little bit. But specifically for this session, we're going to be looking at fundraising. And that is the process of gathering voluntary contributions carried out by non-profit making organisations. So these are organisations which are legally registered entities in the countries they operate, which are allowed to gather donations and charitable funds from the general public, from trusts, foundations, major donors, corporate entities, and so on and so forth. What it is, it's not consultancy, contracted services. So this is government tenders, for example. You see this happen often in healthcare. Sponsorship of events like conferences, that often comes with a VAT liability and tends to sit in a slightly different category. And other forms of earned income, for example, sales of a product. So what is a theory of change and why do we do them? It's because they provide you with a complete roadmap of how your organisation is going to run its programmes, why are they important, what difference is it going to make, which communities are you going to be targeting, and how are you going to be creating meaningful impact. Definition in higher STEM, higher education, for example, it really makes the rationale of what you're doing very explicit. It's also critically something that funders are looking for as well, not just large government funders, also trusts and foundations. And it also helps you articulate your message to the general public and individual donors as well. And more specifically on topics that are covered in a theory of change, what's the problem? Why are you the solution? How do you define yourself in comparison to your competitors? And how are you actually going to make it happen? What is your intervention? Why does it matter? Who are your target audiences? I think in astronomy we often see quite a broad range of audiences, but you really need to narrow it down and be very specific about who you're going to impact and why. Can you measure your interventions? Everything you do, is it measurable? Are you able to demonstrate that you're having impact? Is it working? Is it not working? And if not, how do you go back and change it? And here I'm giving you one example of a theory of change I developed in the UK. This is a very simple example. I'd advise you all to look up your favourite organisations and charities and look up what their theories of change are so you can get some inspiration. But for example, here you can see that we start off with the problem. We define the problem. We look at what the priorities are to address that problem. What kind of outcomes will we have? So, for example, are we going to become thought leaders so that we can influence policy to make sure that policy change happens, which not only releases funding but also releases services and other sorts of resources to reach our target group? What impact are we going to have? Women are going to be safe from technological abuse. They're going to be away and to have their own independence, and they're going to be able to rebuild their lives as a super impact. So at every level, there is another layer that you need to be considering within your theory of change. I will add there's a caveat here. We produced this very simple one for internal reasons. You would normally have what we call outputs there as well, which are the actual activities you're going to have. But always your theory of change, you'll produce a snapshot and an overview of what you're going to do. And then your theory of change drills down quite deeply into your programs, into your interventions, how you're going to measure them, how you're going to deliver them, and why does it matter? So keep asking yourself those questions. Why am I doing this? Why does it matter? Who am I doing it for? And what impact is it going to have? And when we talk about impact, we'll go into that in a bit, but it's what change am I making? And when we talk about impact, this is where we say we can really measurably demonstrate the effect an action or our initiatives had on the particular community or on the environment, if you're looking at climate action, for example. And it's something that is very, very tangible that you can easily put down on a piece of paper and say, yes, my organisation, we were able to deliver this. This was the change that happened as a result of our interventions. Always be talking about impact, always be thinking about impact when you are developing your services, when you're developing your programs and you're identifying who your key audiences are. This is something that funders are always looking for, and it's something that a lot of organisations miss. It's a very competitive landscape out there, and if you aren't able to talk clearly about the impact your programs are having and able to relate it back to your theory of change, you will struggle to compete for funding. So how do you measure impact? How do you ensure that you're able to clearly demonstrate what you're doing? Within international development and most other areas of non-profit management as well, we talk about monitoring, evaluation and learning, which is acronym is MEL for short. So anytime you're looking at international development and you see TOC or MEL come up, there's always referring to this. So you're always going to be monitoring your programs. You're always going to be looking at, are they working? Are they not working? And you're analysing what's happening to see if you need to make changes along the way. You're then doing evaluations. Sometimes obviously donors request this if you're receiving government funding or if you are receiving from a private trust foundation or major donor. The evaluation part is very important because they also want to see that it's working, so it ties into their policies and their objectives as well. And the learning is particularly important too. Did something work? Fantastic. How do we talk about it? How do we make it? Either do we scale it, or how do we replicate this if we want to, or how do we share our success with others so that they can learn from our examples? Also, what's not working too? That's really important so that you can make changes if it's not working, and you can also discuss that with your funders. Please also never worry if something doesn't work out. You don't have to pretend something's going fine for your donors. They want to know if there's problems. They often will be able to help you, and they have resources that will help you. It's much better to have an honest dialogue with your funders. So that's why the learning part is particularly important as well. Obviously, monitoring, evaluation and learning are directly linked to your theory of change. That comes into when you are assessing your outputs and your outcomes. And you put numerical KPIs, key performance indicators, within your theory of change. Those are linked back to your MEL programs as well. And you're gathering meaningful data too. It's not just about your program. It is, again, as we mentioned just now, how do you want to talk about it in the future? How can you use this as a piece to promote your organisation? How can you use this to share your learning, share in publications, share at conferences, so on and so forth? And the most important thing, this really allows you to measure and demonstrate your impact. It's important for you, it's important for your stakeholders, it's important for the communities you serve. It's also very important in able to access funding in the future as well. because it is a very big space, and it can be quite daunting getting some of this information together at the start. And don't worry, there are resources and links for you to go away and read up on as part of this presentation you can take away with you. This gives you an example of the MEL cycle that you follow. So you start obviously doing what we call a needs assessment, where you look at your needs. This is linked to your theory of change. What does your community need? Have you had input from them? What does your project look like? How have you designed it? When you're doing your MEL planning, when am I going to collect data? When am I going to report on it? How does this tie into any sort of funding reporting I need to do? We talk about a baseline study. Most of you are scientists. This will not be unfamiliar terminology to you. What's the starting point from which you're working on? When do I review it? When is my final evaluation? What is my timeline? What are my milestones? What are the key points that I need to develop in my MEL plan? What's my final evaluation? When do I need to get it to a donor? When do we need to look at it internally for our programs? When do we need to share feedback with the community? And how do we review it? Do we want to present it to a board, for example? Do your trustees want to see it? Do you need to, again, share it with your community stakeholders? And how do we learn as an organisation? How do we use this to help ourselves learn and grow? So once you've done your theory of change, you are able then to start looking at your messaging. Messaging is very, very important in fundraising. So we are specifically talking about private donations from trusts, foundations, major donors, individuals, members of the general public here. A lot of astronomy struggles a lot to articulate its message to these groups of people. It's often quite individual asks for things like telescopes, for example. So it's telescopes infrastructures, and obviously there's some massive successes with that. But beyond sort of this very tight focus of academia, astronomy has struggled to articulate why it matters to funders. So when you do your theory of change, it suddenly becomes a lot easier because your messaging is right there. You're able to say, what problems am I working towards? Why is what we're doing important? Why do we matter? I've got the Sustainable Development Goals on here. Everybody is working towards the Sustainable Development Goals, and your theory of change and your monitoring evaluation frameworks all need to be linked back to the Sustainable Development Goals. So you really need to go look at the SDGs, look at the indicators, and see which targets and indicators your organisation fits under. You can use that then as a framework for your theory of change and your MEL to demonstrate how you and your programs are helping the big organisations, the governments, the big foundations and so on, helping drive that change. So it's very important for high value fundraising. It's very important for the general public too, because these messages are generated for people, for the needs of people on the ground as well, just for people like you and me. What we often advise people to do in fundraising is, rather than focus on that thing that you want, so we often use telescope analogy, but I'm going to use the minibus here. Because it is literally called the minibus analogy in fundraising. People say, but I really need a minibus. Like, why will no one fund my minibus? So we ask people to say, hang on, think about, why do you need it? What does our minibus do? Oh, our minibus, transports young people to sports and after school clubs. This helps young people build up their self-esteem. It keeps them off the streets. It keeps them away from crime. It keeps them more engaged in society. It means that we can take them to different kind of activities. It promotes team building in sports. It promotes community cohesion. And this leads to improved educational outcomes, means that we've got employability and entrepreneurship. So these are all the sorts of targets and goals that people want. So suddenly you're telling a very different story to, hey, please give me money from my telescope or my minibus, to, hey, give me some money because our community needs this and we're going to help young people grow and thrive and become, instead of being at-risk youth, they're going to be able to become engaged members of society and have much better outcomes for their future. That's a very different story. So think about your story. Fundraising is all about storytelling, whether you're working with somebody who's a multimillionaire or whether you're developing a crowdfunding campaign for your community. Everybody wants to know what that story is. And I think astronomers are very, very good at telling those stories. So go back to your storytelling and think about how you can frame things quite differently. Again, ensure impact is front and centre. Let's go back to your theory of change. And remember, you can't do everything. So when you're looking at the Sustainable Development Goals, for example, think about which ones you can impact on most. Pick 2 or 3 as an absolute maximum. You can't do all 17. and see how you fit in. We'll talk a bit about collaborations later, but specifically for your messaging, this is very, very important. In fundraising, we have something called a case for support, and this is directly tied to messaging. It helps donors understand why they should donate to you. I should say it is a very specific term in fundraising as well. It's a technical term. It helps you focus on a single fundraising goal, for example, a new mobile planetarium, and we would actually call that a capital campaign because it's a physical thing that you want to fundraise for, or to general funds for your organisation. So usually we would develop an overarching case for support for the whole organisation, and then within that we'd look at the different projects and programmes that need funding. For example, do you need a new mobile planetarium? That's a very distinct capital campaign with a short life cycle of say a year or two, versus an ongoing programme for say planetarium education, for example, and outreach. That's something that is always running. How would we develop a case of support language around that? It serves as your core document, so everything is in one place and all your fundraising messages can be drawn from that one spot. So you don't have to, as a fundraiser, I don't have to keep bugging program staff for information, and program staff are able to contribute to the document and we can all agree on what that looks like, and I don't have to bother them anymore. It has key statistics. It can have quite detailed information. It can be quite long sometimes, but it enables you then to draw from that and produce very short 1 to 2 page documents and leaflets, flyers, marketing materials for prospective donors, your social media campaigns. All of that information can come from your case for support. Case studies are very important for private fundraising. People like to hear how it helps other people. Again, thinking back to the storytelling element, do try and include as many case studies, positive case studies as possible. And it also provides information for your tailored grant proposals as well. Again, usually key statistics is really important, and key phrases and key information. Very, very handy. So make sure you include the following very concise summaries. What's your model, what's your program, the service, what impact has it had to date, if at all, or why do you believe it will have an impact if it's a new service, what is your evidence base for that? And again, tell your story. What's the history of your organisation? How did you get started? Why are you here? People love that. And what's your vision? Vision and mission are really important. Again, they come from your theory of change. But people want to hear that. They want to be able to buy into what is the future, what is going to be so exciting about this. Make sure that your budget is in there. Budget and the amounts you want are very important. So you can include in your internal case of support quite a detailed budget. So fundraisers, again, don't have to keep asking. And also how much you're asking for as well. Whenever you're producing any fundraising material, always be clear to put your ask amount on there. I don't have to necessarily for some marketing materials. I say there's a caveat to that. If you just want to get people interested in what you're doing, there is a link here for the IU case of support where we actually didn't have an ask. We wanted to get people interested, but it does give you an idea of framing and how you can set up these sorts of documents too. So as we move on to income generation, just want to show you a quick slide which shows a breakdown of how non-profits in general are funded, and the majority doesn't actually come from philanthropy. It actually comes from revenue, membership services, any sort of earned income, also government contracted income, tenders and so on. So it's useful to bear this in mind when you consider how you're going to fundraise and who you're going to fundraise from. And on this slide, we can clearly see a vast range of different types of income streams, which is why we talk about income generation as opposed to fundraising, because actually the picture for nonprofit organisations is so much broader than what is a very narrow definition of private fundraising. And I'd like you to maybe have a think about how else you can fundraise and how else you can generate income for your organisations beyond very traditional fundraising methods. For example, with earned income, which we just touched on, there's commercial trade, a lot of intellectual property. So very big examples are drug discovery, for example, if you have organisations that are fundraising in cancer research. Impact investing is becoming very big, and a lot of international NGOs now have impact investment funds. And yes, any way you can do commercial trade income, consultancy comes under this too. What products do you have that you can sell? It's very, very important that you diversify your income. Again, we talked about this at the start. You don't rely on one source of income. So have a think. We're not going to go into it today, but do have a think about how else you can make money outside of writing proposals. The second one is corporate, and this is sectioned off to one side away from philanthropy. A lot of people will think, oh yeah, companies have loads of money, I'm going to go and ask them for money. And actually corporates are far and away the least interested in giving you money. They account for less than 1% of all donations across the board. A company is there to generate profit for its shareholders or its owners. The company is not there to give you money. A lot of corporate foundations are set up to actually take money and then distribute it to their own charities rather than you. And if you do find a good company, and they do exist, there are some good corporate foundations. That's what you would need to be looking at, certainly if you're starting off at your stages of your journey. No company is going to say, yes, let's go into a big brand partnership and we'll have you in KFC or McDonald's, or whether, can you add our donations. Those tend to be saved for the Save the Children's, the UNICEF's, all the ones that can bring their brand to bear and offer the company something in return. So if you're going to work with companies, look at where they have private foundations. They tend to be very good. And also look at pro bono work as well. We'll talk a bit about that in a minute, but there are things like Salesforce, for example, which will give you free licenses. What can you get for free from companies, because they love to give their stuff away for free. So see if you can use that instead. Institutional is fairly straightforward. I think you'll all be very, very familiar with government, multilateral, bilateral funding. EU, for example, in the UK, it's Comic Relief is a very big international development funder. They are tricky, they are very competitive, and you have a very low return on the applications you make. I think there is a separate session worth having around how you work with institutional funding. But do go and make friends with your local INGOs and see how you can partner on their bids. Let them do the hard work for you. It's going to be very difficult for you to be applying to some of these big funds like USAID, for example. Where an institution is a lot more interesting is looking at your local embassies. So have a think about that. A lot of the international development funding is now channeled through embassies, so keep an eye out for interesting grant programs. We had some success with this at the IAU, so it's definitely worth checking out. Philanthropy and movement building, these are the two things that we should really focus on the most, I would advise, for your organisations. That's obviously major donors, trusts and foundations. Movement building is really about building your community, doing your crowdfunding and getting engaged with the general public. So I would also put philanthropy in as part of your community too, because it's all about who you know, and it's all about getting people, telling your story to people who are interested and want to help you out in return. And philanthropy, trusts and foundations and major donors definitely come under that category. Also, just to give you a quick picture of the kind of money that's involved, international development is huge. Huge sums of money flow. It's not that there isn't money. I hear this quite a lot. People think, well, there's no money. There is a lot of money. There is enough money to go around. It is just how you try and access it that matters. And please don't feel that there is no money for you, because there is. And we don't need to be competitive about it. We can be collaborative. If we all combined, yeah, I always like the statistic, we would be the 5th largest economy in the world. So yeah, the non-profits is big business, and it's entirely possible for you to have a piece of that pie. Now, because we've already spent a lot of time talking about what you need to start fundraising, I think this bit is actually relatively straightforward. I say that. I find fundraising very easy. I find it very, very fun. People think I'm slightly mad for saying things like that, but it is. It's really interesting. Once you start putting together your messaging, once you start getting your budgets together, once you have all that done, it's actually very, very straightforward. Firstly, on individual giving and movement building, you have crowdfunding, of course, but you really need to make sure you have an audience to crowd fundraise from. We see a lot of success with this with our colleagues in the Office of Astronomy outreach, where the people who need to move telescopes, for example, we put a crowdfunder out and people will usually respond. I mean, it's a very generous community. So think about what might appeal, and there's lots of different ways you can do crowdfunding. You can do bi-yearly, what we call donation drives. You say, hey, we need we're doing our donations twice a year. Hey, come help us out. We need this or we need that. And people tend to be, yes, I'm really engaged with what you're doing. which is critical. You need to make sure people are engaged and you're continually staying in touch with them and looking after the people in your network. Lots of different ways you can do private fundraising, but you're going to grow your audience steadily. It's not something that's just going to suddenly be like, I can put a donation link on my website and everyone's going to flock to it. That's absolutely not the case. You have to engage your audience. Social media is super important. Digital marketing, it's so important. And it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of effort. So make sure you're building up people, make sure you're engaging with them on Twitter, make sure you're sending out your newsletters, make sure that everyone who comes to your organization gets a warm welcome, even if it's just, it's an automatically generated email with, hey, we're doing this. Make sure that you stay in touch. GDPR, very, very important, and any data protection considerations in your own country too. Make sure you're following the laws around that as well, and you're making sure you're data compliant. It's very important, with particularly with individual giving. The other side of things is high value. So again, this is trust foundations, major donors, so philanthropy and corporate foundations. Research your prospects beforehand. There's a link here to talk you through what is prospect research. Get to know who you are asking your money for so you can be as tailored as possible. No organisation wants to just be bombarded with 500 of exactly the same proposals, like a generic letters, grant letter, don't do it. Just research who you want, go look at what they're doing, take that time to do that and prepare nice tailored proposals. Who do you know as well? Your network, again, it comes down to network and community. Who do you know? I've done my research on my prospects. I have a board. Oh, I see that such and such knows such and such. Could they have a conversation with them, for example? Can they introduce us, and then we can carry on that conversation? You are so much more likely to have success with your funding proposals with trusts and foundations if they are what we call a warm contact. It's a 1 in 4. So for every time you submit every 4 proposals you submit, you'll get 1 gift. If you're going in cold, that rises to around 1 in 12 to 1 in 15. So you can see the amounts of work you're having to do if you're just churning out cold proposals versus doing that networking, doing that relationship building, figuring out who knows who, makes your chances of success a lot better. And that is also why I don't tend to advise people to just apply for open calls for proposals, because you are competing against a huge mass, and it's much better that you focus your efforts on who you know. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do them. There will be certain ones that I think would be definitely worth your time to do, but just don't think that that's the only source. I just have to sit here and be a grant churning out proposal machine. That doesn't work anymore. Something else that's very, very critical, nobody wants to see a ChatGPT generated proposal. You must learn how to write these skills. And I think, I'm talking to astronomers who are very expert, and in your communities, you are expert already at telling that story, writing. You're able to do that. So please don't feel you don't know how to write proposals, because I'm sure you do. It's something funders do not like at all. So if you don't have that capacity, there are some links at the end of here. There's lots of free resources that are available to help you hone your writing skills for grant proposal writing, and they don't have to be big. Most people just want to see 3-4 pages tops in trusts and foundations. It doesn't have to be some massive tome. So don't feel that you can't do it, because you can, and it's a really valuable skill. And make sure you show off your organisation. So this also comes down to the thought leadership piece. Present conferences, promote yourself. Where will funders be? Can I have a conversation with them? Let me introduce myself. Don't be shy. Go and talk to them. They're very friendly, they're very nice, and they want to know who you are. Major donors, again, in your community. Who do you know? Who are the business leaders? Who are the, they are actually really engaged. Who has a passion for astronomy? Who's in the amateur astronomy community? That may know you, reach out to them and say, hey, can we have a chat? And you'd be surprised at how many people go, yeah, sure, I'd love to have a chat with you. They may not be able to help you, but they could say, oh, you know what, I know such and such, maybe you should speak to them and I'll introduce you. So make sure you keep your networking. The final point on private fundraising, any fundraising to be honest, also for institutional fundraising, invest in your CRM, your customer relationship management database. Make sure everything is in one place. There are always endless lists in astronomy floating around, and it's not helpful. You need to have a CRM, you need to have some form of database. Salesforce offers free licenses. I think it's up to 9 licenses. See if it's available in your country. There is an organisation called TechSoup, which also provides a lot of free resources as well. If you are not a registered entity, figure out if you can get some support from a registered entity to even just create a simple access database, but make sure you're putting everything, all these contacts and all these people in one place. Otherwise you lose track of it, and your relationship management and your communication history are very, very important. Very, very quickly on this slide, I mentioned just now about how to train yourself. A lot of free information available. There's two free MOOCs that come highly recommended. Check them out, upskill yourselves. Obviously, you're in a small organization. How do I learn more? This hopefully should be helpful for you. So as we come to a close of this session, your key actions in fundraising: firstly, do your theory of change and develop your case for support before you embark on fundraising. While you're doing your theory of change and case for support, you can start prospect research for high value fundraising. That doesn't have to wait, so you are able to start doing things concurrently. Once you've done your theory of change and case for support, also agree your elevator pitch. If you've got 10 seconds with someone, how do you sell yourself in those 10 seconds? Make sure you are targeted. Make sure you're building relationships. Be careful. One thing to be very careful of is avoid program funding traps. So we make sure you are, wherever possible, asking for funding which is unrestricted, which is why funding from the general public is so important, because you don't have to allocate it to a particular program. Or when your funding is restricted, that on your proposals you are writing in an administration fee. You must make sure you don't focus solely on project funding, because that can actually close organisations down. So make sure you've got a really good mix of restricted and unrestricted funding coming in, and make sure you do that in your planning, financial planning. Make sure, again, digital is super important. It also helps build your brand and links very closely to your communications. And collaborate, partner, join coalitions. Again, make friends with your local INGOs. This is particularly important if you want to do institutional funding and you want to be involved in some of these calls, because you are the technical expert. You have all these expertise in astronomy. A lot of people will want that. There's some really fantastic programs that have been funded this year and also in previous years by the OAD, and you have a lot of value to add to some of these bids, but they need to know about you and they need to know about your programs. So get out there and definitely start networking with those organisations, and that is a major way you can tap into institutional funding for international development. So what next? Yes, your community. Your community is absolutely the most important thing. Who is within your sphere of influence? Who can become in your sphere of influence? It's surprisingly scary how well connected everybody actually is. But do remember, as parting words, any form of fundraising, it requires time and investment of resources. It's not something that is sort of sits as an appendage and you just hire a part-time fundraiser or consultant, whatever, and think it will magically happen. It won't. It is an endeavour that involves the whole organisation. Again, I've already mentioned this. If you just stick a donate now button or just put on a crowdfunding appeal with no preparation, no engagement with your audience, it's not going to work. So make sure you do that marketing, make sure you do that networking. Everything always links back to your theory of change. And if you're a small organisation, as I think many of you are, designate somebody to have ownership of fundraising. Often in very small organisations, it's a joint role, usually with communications, sometimes with policy as well, advocacy work, because it can be very closely tied to institutional funding. But somebody needs to kind of own it. But it needs to be embedded. So it's not like that person just gets it and everyone thinks, great, it's done. It's everybody's responsibility to support their fundraisers, and senior leadership set the tone for that. So senior leadership really need to be involved, really need to be engaged, driving that forward as well. Good messaging and digital resources are absolutely critical. You're up against some stiff competition from other organisations. So how do you stand out in the crowd? How do you make people think, gosh, yes, I must support this organisation. I feel really passionate about it. Identify your audiences and focus on tailored messaging. And the final one, which people always go, seriously, but actually, please don't forget to say thank you to your donors. Every time someone gives you money, if it's €1 or 10,000 euro or whatever, always say thank you. You would be amazed at how many people do not say thank you, and it makes a very big difference. So my final parting thought for you all is to move away from transactional and towards societal impact. Fundraising sounds very transactional. It's like, oh, here's one money to the other. But actually, it's another way you have of achieving your vision and achieving your goals. As a fundraiser, I don't see my job as, oh, hey, it's to get money out of people. I see it as, hey, it's my job to get people interested in my cause and get them interested in what we're doing and bring them on board. And fundraising, the money actually then tends to be a side benefit because people are so engaged and interested in what we're doing, the money then comes automatically. So when you talk about impact and when you talk about how people can be involved in that impact, it becomes a really exciting and interesting discussion. And I look forward to hearing your questions. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Genevieve.
Was that okay? Sorry, I just thought I'd stop sharing my screen in case I talked more by accident.
No, that was great. We have a question already. Roshan?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Genevieve, for that wonderful presentation. I really loved the fact that this was very thorough and very helpful. I do have a question that's related to the responses or the potential responses from the donors. So does it always need to be, so is the response from the donors binary, as in, is it always a yes or a no, or do we also need to prepare our proposal for perhaps a percentage to which the donor has accepted and the rest we need to maybe revise? If that makes any sense. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And just so that I'm clear on the question, are you saying that you'd be approaching donors for part of the overall project task or the whole project task, or?
Yeah, so my question is, I'd be approaching a donor for my full ask, my entire list of asks. But what if a donor, so is there a possibility that the donor might accept a couple of those asks and not others? So do I then need to change my proposal, or do I just continue with it? And is that decision from donors usually binary, as in, is it always a yes or no, or are there gray areas as well? Thank you.
No, thank you. That makes sense. Firstly, yes, they can look at a whole proposal and go, yeah, we're only interested in two things, so submit something on those two things. But usually you would have that discussion with them before you would submit a full proposal. So often you'll go into some dialogue. So we're talking trusts and foundations here predominantly, and major donors sometimes as well. So you'll go into a dialogue with them and you can say, hey, here's my shopping list, basically. Don't call it that, but that's what we usually refer it to as internally. Would you, this is what we're interested in approaching you for. What on here would you consider supporting? And then they'll come back to you and they'll say, yeah, we're interested in, we're interested in your outreach and we're interested in your education program, but we're not interested in sort of scientific meetings. So we only want to see an application on this particular part of your overall program. But you would normally, you should call the donor and discuss it with them first. They're usually receptive to those kind of discussions. So then you're not wasting your time by writing a bigger proposal than you need to, and it makes their lives a lot easier as well, if that makes sense. And yes, it is usually by the point of application, and when they make the decision, it will be a yes or no, or sometimes, not so often, but sometimes they'll say, we're going to defer this to next year, so please reapply again next year. But usually it is a yes or no situation.
Thank you. And if I may, Ram, do we have time? Can I ask a follow-up? All right, great, thanks. So, so if a donor says no, how do you mitigate that relationship risk that you might run in losing that donor in the future?
I mean, I don't think you need to be worried about the no. It's going to happen, but it doesn't mean you can't approach them again in the future. Sometimes it depends if you're speaking directly to the board or a member of the board, the decision-making board of the donor. Then they'll just have gone away and they'll have discussed it with their trustees, and then they're like, yeah, sorry, we can't support it this time. But that certainly doesn't close the door on you from applying again. That doesn't really ruin the relationship. I think what ruins the relationships is if you do things like bombarding them with lots of applications that aren't appropriate, if you are not sort of doing your research before you approach them in advance, if you haven't sort of checked out to see who works there, what they're interested in. Those are the things that ruin the relationship, not necessarily not you applying and then the board decides, no, actually we can't support this.
Any other questions? So I have to give a special thank you to Genevieve because she's not been well for a while, but she still didn't want to miss this presentation. So thanks, Genevieve.
No, that's okay. And I think I'd just add that there's a lot here. So I can see that, it's the kind of thing you might want to go away and digest for a bit, and then maybe come back with some more questions later. And I think Ram and I, we've spoken about this, haven't we, Ram? You're obviously welcome to submit questions later. There's a lot, because there's no way I can fit the entirety of fundraising into half an hour. So if things come up that I didn't mention that you'd like to discuss, or things that I did mention and you'd like more clarity on, obviously drop us an email and we're happy to explore it further.
Hi, I have a question. I'm sorry, I don't know how to raise my hand. And but, may I ask?
Yeah.
Okay, so my question is very practical, because as you were saying, sometimes we apply for money and maybe my project is in Brazil, but I apply for money, I don't know, in the state, and then I have to transfer the money. And this also applies when we have to transfer, for example, objects. And unfortunately, if we do this through normal, banking system, this might be, you might have to pay several fees, both to exchange money as well to pay for the transfer. And when it's for shipping instruments, for example, you might have a lot of problems in the border, and you have to pay extra fees depending on what you are importing. So I was wondering, since all these projects are for, are projects for humanity, somehow are not for personal reasons. I was wondering if somehow there is a way, or they start being thought about how to do this without losing money of the project. Now, these are money that should be invested, I don't know, in a community or somewhere, and it's a pity that we have to lose them somehow to pay the bank. So I was wondering if there is a way to do this without having to pay the fees.
Ram, do you want me to answer and then you add? Because I know we've discussed this in the past as well, and it is a problem. Firstly, what we advise, if you look at international development as a big picture, what we advise small in-country organizations to do is approach your local INGOs and see if you can build up a relationship with them, because they can often help. I mean, I don't know if it's been done in astronomy specifically, but I know this is how I've worked at previous organizations, and they will be able to help you with these kind of questions. So you partner with them and they can help you figure out the logistics and save your money, because it doesn't necessarily have to go through banks. So that's one route, is to find your local INGO who already has those networks in place.
Sorry, Jenny, can you just clarify, expand on what is INGO?
Oh, sorry, international non-government organizations. So this is the Save the Children, UNICEF, World Vision. So all of those very, very big international development non-profit agencies. Any UN agency, UNHCR is another one. There's quite a few. Oxfam, all that side of stuff, all those sorts of people. So you can approach those in your country. And I think as I advised in my presentation, you should definitely do that anyway. They're a very, very good resource. But in astronomy specifically, I know what's happened is that institutions have accepted payments. So that was my other thought, which actually might be faster, is speak to your institution to see if they can receive funds on your behalf. Certainly if you're getting funds from, say, the US or Europe, institutions in countries like Brazil, I think is where you are, Ayana, yes? They will already have established sort of partnerships set up so that they can receive funds from the US, for example. So you might be able to reduce your fees that way as well.
Yeah. Well, I can say from a practical point of view, I'm trying here in Rio through institution, especially there is an institution that works with technology that they are trying to support us. The problem sometimes with institution is bureaucracy can be not simple to handle, because you are somehow out of their system. It's not what they generally do. So you're asking them to support in doing something that they're not bureaucratically allowed to do. And so you have to go through quite a long bureaucracy to try to have them support. But yes, that's what we are trying now, is to go through institutions.
Yeah, sorry, Ram.
Yeah, no, it's actually a question for you, Genevieve. So in Ariana's case, what we did is she's Italian, so the IU sent money to her Italian bank account, and then she transferred it from her Italian bank account to her personal account in Brazil. And obviously, she loses a lot in the fees and stuff. There's like, twice the fees for both the transfers. But we don't have a better solution. There was another couple of projects, I think, in Southeast Asia, also faced issues in receiving money. I don't know. It seems to be worse now in the last 2 years. Maybe the banks have become stricter. The process have changed.
Yeah, it's a real problem, and it's it's to do with taxation, it's to do with money laundering, it's to do with capitalism, and there's no easy solution, and that's why I think it's about finding those partners who have those facilities already set up. So that's why INGOs already have that. That's literally one of the reasons why INGOs are structured the way they're structured, is that they can actually receive funds without this massive faff. There's always going to, I think it's actually part of your budgeting. It's worth bearing in mind, because there's always going to be some form of fee or bank transfer. So for big programs, we'll always budget that in. So if you are going to know that you're going to incur a banking fee, then make sure that that's included in your budget as well. And you can usually explain it, and most funders will be supportive of that. You don't have to feel like you need to hide those kind of costs, because it is a problem. But yeah, in the short term, it's better if you can do it through an institution, because they are already familiar with who you are. But in the longer term is to look at the organizations that have these sort of international networks set up already, and they can partner with you.
Yes, thank you. I will try that, to try the connection with either Save the Children or UNICEF here in Rio. Thank you.
And Genevieve, when you approach these INGOs, do they have systems in place to work with outside organizations like this on like transferring payments and stuff?
Yeah, because that's where you partner. So you sort of become one of their program partners, and then they are able to transfer the funding towards you. So that's why I'd always advise, instead of having to get involved in what is a very complicated and very challenging international development funding landscape, find your partners, join their coalitions, and then they have the mechanisms already in place for you to be able to receive that funding. I think it really depends on the country, and it depends on the organization. It depends on how close you are to them. But there are some that will help you out with things like transfers, but you have to sort of make yourself relevant to them, if that makes sense.
Okay, correct. Luciana?
Yes, can you hear me? Yes, good afternoon, morning, everyone, and thanks, Genevieve, for the presentation. It was really good. My question actually goes maybe more for the OAD and for Ram than for Genevieve, but it's related with funding. And it's a bit the comment that I already had previously. I don't know what really can be done, but when the projects get funding from when the projects are selected from the OAD and then the funding comes, I already pointed out that in many countries with the inflation and then with the local money that is there, that due to the inflation, the value of the money changed actually quite a lot in 1 year, and that's a bit exactly the situation that we have here in Ethiopia, So I have to say that receiving the funding at the beginning of year, when maybe the money will be used 6 months later or even 8 months later, because we have 1 year to conduct different activities, and it's really not ideal, because in 6 years the inflation can actually eat a lot of that money that is there. So when we write a proposal, so the thing is, how do we deal with it? Because when we write a proposal and you put the funding in, let's say, foreign currency, you calculate that in foreign currency that is stable. But then when it comes, and that's the problem that we had in 2022 when the SAI growth was accepted for the first time, the money was transferred at the beginning, but then the whole workshop was conducted in November because it took time, I mean, to organize everything and so on, you know. So by the time when we actually had to use the money, we didn't have any more the amount that we requested when we convert that now into the same, no? So the money lost the value, no? So I don't know if, I mean, this is a serious thing, you know, and this year we will face the same problem, no? So I don't know what is the capacity of the OAD to actually discuss that with the IU. Because I can imagine that for IU, it's easier to just transfer for all projects the money at the same time. But I think the inflation has to be taken into account and that the local partners, because finally, we are left with the problem, no? That what we reported, what we gained, and so on, we cannot actually, as I said, we don't have the same money in 6 months from now or 8 months or 10 months, no? So how do we deal with that? I mean, this is something for the future projects. And as I said, it's really a serious problem, at least here in Ethiopia. In 1 year, the inflation takes a huge part of the funding that has been transferred in at the beginning of the year, no? And I'm sure Ethiopia is not the only country, no, with that difficulty. So yeah, that's a bit the point that maybe we can discuss and see, you know, how with the IU office we can bring that maybe, you know, from several voices so that maybe our voice is heard, and then maybe, you know, for some projects it can be transferred at the beginning of year if they don't mind, and for other projects maybe, you know, in May or June or July, something like that, you know, or do it, yeah, I don't know, it's something to really. So I would like to hear from both of you any alternatives.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something we can propose to the IAU, maybe 2 times, one in January, one in June. But we also don't want to have too many transfers because again the fees apply with every bank transfer. But a question for you, Mirjana, in Ethiopia, is it possible to have a euro or dollar account?
No, no.
Okay.
I
Okay,
mean,
because
we
I know in
cannot
some
get here. We cannot get the funding that is transferred. It will be in the local currency. We cannot get it in any foreign currency. That's what I'm saying, that when you transfer now, if you transfer in January, well, you transfer the amount that the project got. But since we can only get in local currency, if we will be organizing, buying tickets, organizing the training and everything in 5 months from now, already this is not anymore 10,000. It will be 8,000 or 9,000 and so on. So we definitely lose the funding that has been transferred in January because of the inflation.
Okay. Okay. Now, yeah, let's chat about this, and I'm sure we can come up with a plan. But I do know that some other countries.
But I raised this problem already before, because you remember the last time in 2022, I actually asked, can we get the transfer not at the beginning of the year, but when I let you know, when we know when we will need the money, well, 2 months, 1 month in advance, we can let you know, and then you transfer. No, that is what, for example, the IU is doing for the symposiums. No, when the symposiums are organized, the people who host the symposium, they don't transfer when the proposal is approved. They will transfer when the symposium will be actually organized. So you let know, as organizers have to let know the IAU in advance, and then they will transfer. So for example, with the symposium in Ethiopia in November, that's what we did. We didn't request the transfer until the very last month, so that we don't lose due to the inflation, the money. So I suppose the similar can be done with these proposals, no? That the money is not transferred when the proposal is approved, but when actually the activities will be conducted.
Yeah, we can definitely make a case for that. Genevieve, do you want to add something?
Yes, unfortunately, it's not something within my expertise, because that's a sort of a programs and finance issue. Doesn't really fall under fundraising so much, but there are a couple of people I can ask who do work in that space, how that works and how they manage it. So I think, Ram, let's talk about it. I think we should come back on that one to everybody. It's a very important point. I know it's a problem in general across international development too, so there must be a solution.
Any other questions? So I know some of you may be wondering why we are talking about fundraising, because it's still very early in your projects, but I think that's sort of our point. Start thinking about it now, because preparing to raise funds takes a long time. And you know, Genevieve in her presentation talked about setting up a non-profit. I think that's also a decision that many of you will have to take now, whether it's worth your time and effort to go and set up that non-profit. Not all of you have that. But if you're planning to continue this project in the future, if you're planning to raise funds, I think it's probably worth the effort. I don't know if you want to add anything, Genevieve.
Yeah, I think either you do want to sort of turn this into its own entity, or you need to come to sort of a more formal agreement with your institution or another organization that can receive funds for you, because unless you have that status, you're going to be really limited in what you can do. So within astronomy, we see there's a lot of partnerships with institutions who will collect money on your behalf. And that's if you're not ready to suddenly launch into a big organizational structure and so on. Forming a more sort of stable partnership and agreeing with your institution to collect funds for you is a good way to go.
Marjana?
Yes, that was a new hand. Sorry, sorry, Ram. Yes, so this is now the question for Genevieve. So Genevieve, from your experience, which is enormous, I mean, what is in your opinion like the most effective way to you know, to get back to the donors with the reports from the activities, no? Because you know, that's always where the doubt comes, no? Like, do you send like a short report that, you know, that people will read, or a longer report? Because of course, if it's longer, then more details you can bring there, and or you provide like the two, so depending on who wants to read what has a chance. And then in what kind of form do you suggest that? Because I think it's really important that all donors in a certain way get feedback from the activities when they are conducted, and that you know, they can see really the impact of the funding. So what would be like from your opinion, the most effective way?
Yeah, I mean, reporting is great because it gives you a chance to say, hey, can we come back to you for more money? Here's our wonderful report. We'd like to apply to you again. So reporting is super important. Firstly, because you can go back with a second ask, but mainly because it gives a chance for you to show off your program and show off your project, and keep that dialogue with the funder open. Each funder will have different requirements. So usually it's a grant stipulation, and they will actually say we require progress report every year, or if you say you have multi-year funding, for example, they'll ask for progress report every year. Some funders ask every 6 months. That's not so common because I think, yeah, I mean, especially you're scientists, it's quite difficult to show results after 6 months only sometimes. And it's just, you say, when would you like to hear from us? What do you want to see? Do you want just like a short 2-page document? Do you need, sometimes they'll have their own templates, especially if it's more of a institutional type of donor. Say Comic Relief is a good example of that in the UK. You have to follow their template to report back. So it's just asking them what they want. If they say, hey, we don't mind, sometimes they really like media. It's quite nice to include a short video clip from some of the people who've actually been impacted by your project directly. Again, it's really great to include case studies if you can. And yeah, some donors are quite formal, and some are quite relaxed. Like I'm just working on, or I used to work on something for Kavli, for example. They said, yeah, just after 6 months, just come back to us with a short, like, how did it go? And yeah, some funders want like a big tome. So it really depends on what they want. So I'd just be sure to make sure you've gone through your grant agreement, you've gone back to them to already check in with them on when they want to have a report before you start your program.
But I mean, mainly because for those who have already their format, the clear information, you know, in terms of the frequency of submitting reports and so on, it's easier because you have already written, you know, but I mean more on those donors who do support, but, you know, out of like, you know, they support because they like activity, because they care to support, you know, but they don't really request in an obligatory way any report, or they don't have any format, you know. So in those cases, what would be like the in your opinion, the most efficient way of reporting?
It depends on your audience. So if you're talking trusts and foundations, then you automatically send a report at the end of each year or the end of your project if it's only a year long. So you just send it as a courtesy. They'll always be happy to receive it. You don't have to send anything very long. Just a page or two, probably 2 pages maximum, maybe, yeah, again, with some maybe a nice short media clip. For general public, so if you do crowdfunders or if you have individual donors, you can keep in touch with a lot of people on social media. And you also, hopefully they'll have signed up with an email, so you can do like a newsletter which says, hey, here's the project update. But when your project closes, you can also send a quick, very, because it's general public, not a funder, you just send almost like a newsletter on what's happened, again with the media, again with sort of nice engaging story about what happened. So it depends on your audience, but yes, it's always advisable to send a report, and I thank you so much for supporting us. It always goes down well. You mustn't worry about bombarding people with that. They'll be happy to have it.
Thank you.
All right. So if there are no other questions, let's see. Okay, I don't see any other questions, so we can move on. But before we go on to the second part with Ariana, Patricia, and other people, I just want to quickly show you something. So all the slides, all the recordings from the last couple of days, including today, will be published on this page. You should all have the link to this page. So there's already some slides here. The rest will be published hopefully today or tomorrow. And all the video recordings are here. But more importantly, for projects, if you scroll right to the bottom of the website, you'll see something called information for funded projects. So everything that we have talked about in the last couple of days, plus the documents that I've sent you since January, will all be found here, including the communication stuff and more background on astronomy for development, monitoring and evaluation, reporting requirements, and a bunch of resources here. So under the resources, you'll find more information on what we talked about today, like fundraising, but also astronomy activities. So a couple of IEU platforms where you can find astronomy activities for free, more evaluation resources. This is a guide that Genevieve kindly prepared. Please do have a look. There's tons of information on this fundraising, how to guide, and information on the programs of the other offices that you heard from in the last couple of days, as well as the recordings from previous years. So you can find all of this on the website at any time.
I just had one more thing to add, and then I have to go.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I just wanted to say as well, if you want resources, if you're based in institutions, wherever you are in the world, there's usually a fundraising department in your institution. So go and speak to them. We tend to be pretty helpful and friendly, I'd like to think. So please reach out to your fundraising departments in your local institution as well. And they should be happy to speak to you and at least give you some advice and guidance and support on where you might be able to apply. So thank you, everyone. Do drop us an email if you want anything else. Nice to see you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, now the last session of the onboarding sessions is an informal chat with some of the people who have run other OAD projects. So I invite Ariana, Patricia, and I don't remember the other 2 people you said would be joining. Ariana?
Yes, let me see. Is Gabriela? Gabriela and Maria Clara?
Okay,
I don't see them yet. Maybe they will join in a bit.
Yeah. So just as a brief introduction, Ariana, Patricia, both of you are based in Brazil, both in Rio, I think. Astronomers who have run a lot of OED projects. So I told this to Ariana the other day that Brazil has the biggest success percentage in terms of OED projects. So they have had the most number of funded projects from the least number of proposals. So they have definitely got the way to write proposals as well as to execute projects. So I'm sure there's a lot that we can learn from them. So Ariana, that you said that you'll just talk for a few minutes and then we can open up for questions.
Yes, we organize that Patricia is gonna chat for like 10 minutes and then me as well. Then maybe if Maria Clara and Gabriela will join, they are as undergraduate students who participate to the project, and I thought it could be interesting for them to share their experience as students. And then yes, we can have questions. So I think Patricia will start.
Can we interrupt you if there are any questions in between, or would you prefer to wait the end?
Yeah, as you wish. For me, it's not
Okay.
a problem. Okay.
Okay.
So hello everybody. I hope you can hear me well. So first of all, my name is Patrícia Spinelli, and I work at the Museum of Astronomy and Related Sciences in Brazil. I have a PhD background in astrophysics, but now for almost 10 years, I work here at the museum as a researcher in the field of informal science communication or informal science education, but sometimes also we can say science communication, sometimes science education. This depends where you are. These names change a little bit, but this means that I'm conducting research on these kinds of projects, specifically in astronomy. But I'm also always conducting, because you cannot dissociate the practice and the research in these cases, right? And I have never myself had a project approved from OAD. I normally am the copy. I'm in the team, and perhaps because of my long experience, I always have people coming to me and asking for collaboration, and this has been like a very nice journey. I have a few slides just to share to you. So I'm going to share my screen with you. And if you have questions, please just feel free to ask me. So I wanted to highlight some Brazil projects, things of because we have been very successful, right? Having projects approved. Then I would like to bring you some examples. But first, it's important to say that I am a member of the PILOT, the Portuguese language office from the OAD. And I don't know how much you have been talking about this these days, but briefly, what unites our regions is the common language, the Portuguese language. And this and when you have a look in this map, you see that Portuguese is the official language of the regions, but not only Portuguese, because in the countries, in the participating countries and regions, there are other spoken languages. And one specificity of our office is that we are the regions is span across 5 continents, and this brings us many challenges. For instance, even to arrange face-to-face or virtual meetings, because yeah, we are very much spread. And another thing that is important to notice is that the process of bringing together these regions was forged centuries ago by the process of colonization. So, and in the case of African countries, this process is very recent, of becoming independent countries is really, really recent. So this is something very important for us to have in mind, because when we look to the SDG goals, there are, of course, many goals that we can address in our projects, and this is, I guess, this is common to everyone here. Of course, we want to fight poverty. We all want quality education. This is obvious. We think about astronomy, how astronomy can bring work and economic growth, how young generations can use astronomy skills in different kinds of jobs. But having this in mind, specific regarding to our office, we also want gender equality, we want to reduce inequality, we want peace and justice, we want the institutions of the Global South and epistemologies to be acknowledged. And of course, we want racial equality. That is missing, actually. It's missing. I don't know why, but this agenda fails to touch in the topic of racial equality. And this is very important for us. So in specific cases of the Brazil projects, I think that these components will be very much addressed in the projects. And I will just like highlight 3 projects that I participated in the team or collaborating, and then I will leave to Ariana to talk about the ongoing projects. So one project that, in my opinion, was very, very successful is the Behold the Sky project. And this project is run in my institution. I was not the PI of this project. I was co-PI. And this project, we actually assemble Astro Kits. And in these Astro Kits, we have a Coronado Solar Telescope and other education resources. And these resources, we do not manipulate, not as the astronomers or professionals. We lend the equipment, the observing equipment to school teachers, and they will run the activities at their schools independently. Of course, we offer the trainings, and so the teachers have to come to the museum to learn how to use the equipment and education material. And when they are available, they get this material and they bring to their school. And why we use the sun and not the night sky? So this is very much based on our reality. For us here in Rio, not only we have light pollution, but it still is possible to see some stars, but it's very difficult for teachers to gather students at night. It's dangerous. The city is immense, so it's very difficult to find money to transport students to do any kind of activities at night. So this is something that is very based on our reality. Furthermore, teachers in general, they are spending time at schools during daytime. And it's amazing. The results of this project is really amazing. We have like 5 Astro Kits, and the cooperation between the museum, that is an academic institutions, and the teachers is really fruitful. The teachers, they get very empowered and they become independent astronomy communicators. In general, we expect that they observe the sun with their school class, but normally what they bring back to us is much more than that. They promote events, they open the school to the community. So the whole school community is involved in this process of observing the sun. So they are like multipliers. They really act as multiplier, and this is a very successful project. Another project that I was also involved and was funded by OAD was the Brazilian Network for Astronomical News. And this it's like a communication project that we try to gather astronomers interested in public outreach, but to work directly with Brazilian journalists to try to publish more correct information about astronomy on the press, because mistakes were very common. Also to increase the amount of news in the press about astronomy. And this project run before fake news were so strong, but there was also something else related with this process of decolonization. Many of the astronomy news on the press, they were kind of imported. They were normally the direct translations from press release of institutions from Europe and from the United States. And what we wanted was to bring Brazilian science to the press. And this was also a very successful project. And the connection between journalists and astronomers got stronger. And nowadays we have many astronomers that are commenting on the news quite often, or even have their own space on the journals to write about astronomy. And this one, well, this is actually an activity that in Portuguese it's named Faz Ciência como uma menina, that would be better translated to English like do science like a girl. And this is an activity that is running within the pilot, which I am coordinating and has received microfunding from OAD to try to put the offices more active after the pandemics. And this activity has been a really nice surprise. We are conducting this activity online with girls from the 5 regions of the pilot. So that is to say, we have girls from Brazil, that is Latin America, girls from Cape Verde, Mozambique, from Africa. We have girls from Macau region in China that they also speak Portuguese, so Asia, and we also have Portuguese participating. And this activity, actually, what we wanted was to celebrate the Girls and Women's Day in Science. But since this year, the 11th of February was actually during Carnival. It was very difficult to do anything with the participating girls. We decided to do an ongoing activity for a month. And what we are doing with these girls, we gathered these participating girls in a WhatsApp group, and every week we are posting some tasks for them, and they have to hear a podcast, and from this story that is in a podcast format, they will have to do some activities. So this week, the past week actually, they were observing the moon, and they have to reply to the activities via an audio format or sending pictures. So here are some of the pictures sent in the groups. So you can see the moon, the quarter moon in different shapes because they were taking pictures in different continents. So these are some of their productions, and the idea behind of having them speaking their findings in the WhatsApp group is that we are going to gather all their voices and their different Portuguese accents in a new podcast episode. So like the ending of this activity will be their own podcast, so they listening themselves. And of course, with this activity, we also have this in mind. We want the girls doing sciences, but we also want them to grow mutual respect regarding to the place where they come from. So I think that's it for now, and I'm going to let Ariana bring more information about Brazilian projects. Thank you.
Thanks, Patricia. Before Ariana begins, any questions? I know that there's a very complex environment in Brazil, which is maybe the case in so many other places. So maybe the experience that you have in Brazil, Patricia and Ariana, I think is probably relevant to a lot of other people here. Any questions?
Or maybe we can also take questions all together at the end, I thought. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah, that's fine. You can go ahead.
Okay, can you see the screen?
Yes, it's not full screen. Oh, yes. Yeah.
Okay, so First of all, thank you, Patricia. That was a wonderful presentation, and they are amazing projects. And actually, Patricia is participating in one of the projects and another one that we will start this year that I'm going to show now. So these two projects I'm showing in the screen. One is Under Other Skies that I am PIing, and the other one, Rumbia, is PI by Gracie Mary Morera, who is the organizer of a museum of Afro-descendant here in Rio de Janeiro. So, and this work has been possible thanks to the collaboration of a lot of people. I'm listening some names here, but there are even more people involved. And I thought it could be interesting to see actually some problems we face and things that we learn. So this first project, Under Other Skies, is a project that made me know OAD. I didn't know OAD before. Actually, I also met Ramazani in that time. And this project is the collaboration between astronomers and anthropologists in Brazil, as well as professors from an indigenous Aldeia Verde. And then we have collaborators also in England. And this project started when I visited an indigenous Aldeia in Minas Gerais, in the nearby Bahia, so the north of Minas Gerais, where a friend of mine, that Claudia Magnani, that's in the bottom right picture, was doing her PhD work in anthropology. And that's where I learned my first lesson about how the education we have in astronomy is very Western centered. So when I start chatting with her about the idea of collecting the stories and the chants of the indigenous people regarding the sky, I still had a view of astronomy where, the Western astronomy, the Lambda CDM paradigm is the truth, and the rest are histories. And she explained me that that's not really the truth, that we have different scientific paradigm. Within each paradigm, each culture show. Each culture has its own vision, its own science. So she taught me respect through different vision of the sky, and that's why we call it Under Other Skies, because different people, different culture can see the sky in different ways. So that, I think, is a very important point, that we always have to respect and know that we don't know, and that we always learn from the others. And also the importance of having people from different areas working with us, especially when we work, for example, with indigenous populations, and also the importance of intercultural approaches to science, so that to bring this vision of different scientific paradigms as a way of fighting, as Patricia was saying, discrimination in Brazil and in the world. And we had a lot of problems in developing this project that's still ongoing. First of all, soon after the project started, COVID also started. All the aldeias, all the villages of indigenous people were closed, as well as the cities. So we couldn't run the project personally. So thanks to OAD funding, we managed to build, as is shown in the middle picture, antenna to provide internet connection in the indigenous aldeia, so that we could have internet dialogues, and they could also participate to events online, not only with us, but with other projects. So indigenous situation in Brazil is very complicated. That's why I'm speaking about overwhelming situation, because I found myself in the middle of a situation that is way beyond of what I thought it would have been. So also due to politics in that time in Brazil, they were facing a lot of violence, a lot of problem also with neighboring different religious people. And so, as is shown in the third picture, they moved. They left their aldeia and they moved and they occupy a land to build a new aldeia, their dream aldeia, which was Aldeia Scuola Floresta, so the forest school village. This happened illegally. Well, we support them totally, but of course, when you occupy a land, it's not something that you can plan. So as a result, when they left the land, they also left the antenna behind. And when they went back to take them and bring them to the new village, together with the company that installed them, part of them have been stolen. And we, of course, went through the legal action to try to refine them, but that's something that I was not expecting to face, for example. And then in the new Aldeia, they didn't have anything. So again, thanks to OAD support, we were able to help them building an artesian wall that is seen here in the picture with the kids looking at the water, together with support from Caritas, from Teofilo Toni, that's the neighboring village. And that has been, is a way that we can give them really support in building their school forest. And nonetheless, we managed to collect materials, and we are finalizing now the web page where all these materials are collected. And here I'm showing a drawing. So in the web page, we will have different materials, including chants on the sky, and also drawings that describe the stories. On the left, you can see a drawing of a man walking. And I really like it because it shows how the path of life is not straight, You always have up and down. And, as time passes, your collaborators can also have different they can also have different problems in life, so they might leave the project. Many things can happen. And so I think time is something that we always have to take into account while developing the project. And then I wanted to show a bit of Rubia. That's a project led by Gracie Marie Moreira that we can see in the middle of one of these panels. You can see her name below her face. So this project wanted to join a center of culture, of African culture in Rio, to institution of astronomy. We organized webinars, we organized several activities with the idea that in the moment that you connect culture and science, you can really bring science toward people that often are not connected to science dissemination. Is a channel, and is a channel that again has always a return, because at the same time astronomers might get connected with knowledge and places that they didn't know. So Casa Taci Assiata, that's a museum that Gracie is running, is next to the observatory of Valongo, where I used to work back then, and yet many of the students don't know about the existence of this museum. So it's really a way to make a bridge between astronomy and culture. And here we can see also we did some semi-presential event. You can see Patricia with Gracie at the observatory. And on that same day, we also had a dance from traditional Afro-Brazilian culture at the observatory. And I think somehow this highlights the importance of institutional support. So here on the top right of the webinar picture, there is the ex-director of the Observatory of Valongo, Elio, and thanks to his support, he really has been opening the doors of the observatory to this project and always say yes to all our requests. So I really wish to thank him and to acknowledge how important it is to have institutions giving support to projects. So this is a little scheme that shows how the pillar of Orumbia, that you have institution on a side that work together for the goal. You have a group of people from different sides of knowledge that together try to build a new quality education. And this joint effort aims at reducing inequalities. And something that is also, I think, fundamental to say, are 2 points. One, and that will bring us to the to the picture on the right. So while we have interventions from people from a Quilombo here in Rio, Espaço Suinã, And something that they were telling us is how much sometimes they feel they are not brought to the project as protagonists. They are not brought to the project as co-creating the project. And that's something that is very important, that when we work with other communities, we are co-creating knowledge. And that is important because we empower them in a reality that often is oppressive against them, as well as we give them right. You know, they are the persons that have this knowledge. And another aspect that also important in Brazil and is shown on the left panels, where we have different people speaking in one of the webinars, is that often, as Patricia was saying, due to the history of Brazil, and we have that the scientific world is a white world, and often the Black youth doesn't feel reflected, feels that that's not their path. So it is fundamental to have astronomers, Denise Gonçalves and Alan Alves Brito and Elaine and other astronomers in Brazil that can be a reference for them to say, look, science is for everyone, independent of your race and of your gender. And finally, I just wanted to say something about the new project we are doing. That is a project we will be running in a favela here in Rio de Janeiro, in the favela of Pavãozinho and Cantagallo. This is a picture taken from the favela. In fact, it's called Closer to the Sky because often favela and Rio are on hills. And I think something that is fundamental also to think of is that when we work in a marginalized situation, everything is more complex. And for example, due to history, majority of the favela people are Black people, and they suffer a lot of racism, discriminations, and violence. And this is also often combined with what is now called environmental racism. So where they live, you can see in this picture the favela over the bridge. Where they live, they have a lack of electricity, of running water, sometimes sanitation, and the internet is a big problem, for example, and then makes the development of the project complicated, but also connecting to what Dominic was explaining the other day. This can affect directly the psychology of people. So people can be in distress, children can be very vulnerable psychologically, and also adults after a whole life of difficulty can have moments of difficulty in realizing the project, can have up and down. And so I think it's something that has to be taken into consideration because, of course, this extends the time that you need to make the project. But of course, also in favela, we have a wonderful, incredible culture based on art and music, and there where we want to connect to develop the project that's already started. And to conclude, I wanted to show something that we participated to write this last project, which is the OLS, Open Life Science Project. It's possible, is a free project that anyone can join at any stage of development. So from when you have an initial idea to when you have a running project and you want to make it stronger. So just to say that's something that you can look into it if you want some support or new idea. Is a very interesting project. Thank you. And yes, and I would like to call Gabriella now. That's a student, and she joined us here to tell us a bit how it is to work in this project.
Hi. I just wanted to share my experience working on this project. I started working on Orombia in 2022. And since then, I helped to develop mainly materials for the projects. And it's been important to me to be on this project and be helping on this project because first of all is a project that helps signify the region where we call in Rio Little Africa. This is the first thing that most motivated me to participate on it. And first, it's a multi-institutional project. So being in contact with other institutions, not only academic institutions, but cultural, social institutions also helps us to embrace the open science meaning of the projects, especially when we take back the idea that is aimed to underrepresented groups, especially now we're working with the basic education with children and formal and informal education. So we see actually they feeling as main characters of the scientific process that they didn't felt before. And I'm also find it good to have access to materials and some literacy in the Black culture that I didn't had before. So it's very important to me participating on this project. Orumbia especially helped me, especially with this part of literacy. And it's been good to help with education because like in just bachelor's degree, we don't actually have this part of teaching lessons and education like this type. I think this is a problem of all science bachelor courses, like physics too, mathematics, and I forgot what I had. Closer to the Sky. And the Closer to the Sky project helped me with the experience of seeing, like in practice, how we teach astronomy, like in practice. I don't do the classes, but Ariana and Maria they do. And it's been very important to me to see how in practice we teach science for children especially. So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ariana and Gabriela. Any questions? Otherwise, I have some questions for you that I think may be useful for the other projects to hear. So other from Ariana, Patricia, Gabriela, just I wanted to hear from you on your process for planning your project. At the beginning of the project, what's the general process for planning? How do you find out what is being needed by your target audience? What is needed by the community? Like what kind of processes do you have in place or you follow?
Okay, I start and then you join. Okay, so I think something that is, at least for me, fundamental is the dialogue. So in all the three projects, we built the project in collaboration with the first one with anthropologists especially, and the second one with Gracie and people from Casa da Ciafiata, and the third one with artists and educators from the favela. So that's something that I've learned that I don't know. I don't know which are their problems. So I need to find out, you know. So first of all, I need to understand the situation, and that requires contact. So for me, it's always very important to have this contact to understand what is needed, and somehow when you understand what is needed both by their institution or their organization, you can start understanding somehow where you want to invest the money where you need the money to make the project running, what is lacking, where we have to, how can we help them, is always something that we do together. And so the first part of the plan is seeing who you're working, at least is for me, and what are their needs. So how can we help through astronomy for them to success in the realization, of the project, and also which are their curiosity, what would they like to know about astronomy? How can we use astronomy for their, what could be interesting for them to know about astronomy? So at least for me, the first stage is always a chat, with them.
And are these people that you know already? How do you establish your first contact with the community?
Okay, yes, there are people. In the first case, Claudia is from my own city in Italy. We know each other since we were teenagers, and so in that case, how I ended up knowing people in Zaldea is because I went there visiting her, and that's where we started chatting. Casa da Cianciata, as I was saying, is just below the observatory. So when I was going to the observatory, when I moved to Rio, I casually passed by there, and I enter and I start speaking with Gracie, and that's how I ended up meeting Gracie. And now I am living in the community where the project is being developed. So when I moved here, I wanted to start doing projects here about astronomy. It was during pandemic. Children in favelas didn't have classes for all the period of pandemic. So I thought, okay, we can do something. I was home anyway as well. And then after speaking with someone who spoke with someone else who spoke with someone else, I ended up meeting our actual collaborators. Actually, I didn't say that. They are an artist and his wife. They have a little library on the top of the hill. It's called the Niño das Águias, that is Eagle Nest. And then chatting with them, we started building up this project.
I would like to add that I think the processes in the case of the projects that I am running right now, or I had already participated, similar. But currently I didn't mention there is also another project that I run here in Rio that also involved the girls in the favelas. We also go to the favelas and do science clubs with very little girls. So the problems are the same. So this is not OAD funded project, but it's funded by a Brazilian agency. And I think the trust is very important. I think this process that Ariana is saying of collaborating or co-creating things is also, it's very, very much trust based. So this is, it has to have a very open relation and a one-to-one relation. And I think this, for instance, for me, that I did my PhD in Germany, and I started like doing systematic science education and communication while I was a PhD in the Galileo Mobile project. So this is where all started. I think even within the Galileo Mobile, this has changed a lot because the process like 10 or 15 years ago, this was very much a one direction process. Like we were going to places and visiting and trying to do things. And this has changed, like even within the Galileo Mobile, this has changed a lot from this co-creation style and trust-based relations. And of course, it has to have an open design because sometimes there are many things we want to say about astronomy and the potentialities of astronomy and all the technology that astronomy encompasses that can help people in other professionals, but sometimes and very often we have to shift our expectations to adjust to the needs. Otherwise, it's very, very difficult to run the projects under these circumstances. But if we want to change the world, if we really want astronomy for a better world, our audiences, it will not be helpful to keep communicating or doing education projects to the easiest audience. If we really want science for a better world, to change this crazy world, we really have to try to face these challenges, and it is very difficult. I'm very sure that everyone here knows what I'm talking about, because we are trying to do this. We are trying to go to audiences that are under very, very neglected circumstances by state instances.
I really like that. Yeah, I think definitely from the OED side as well, there has been a shift in how we approach the projects. We want to know what the people need, what the community needs, and to work together with them rather than being one-way communication. So there's not a lot of time left, but I do want to give a chance to all of the projects that are still here to say maybe one or two biggest challenges that you think you will be facing in your project. So I will give you maybe 1 or 2 minutes to think about it. But I want all of you to maybe give the biggest challenge that you think you'll be facing in the next 1 year while running your project. So that's Bayarpu, Chukwudi Agustina, Timothy Egbim, Felipe, Hira Fatima, Louis, Ojima. I think you are the only projects left so far. Oh, and Tabitha, and I guess Ariana as well. So maybe just think about in your project what is the biggest challenge that you expect to face, and we can at least share that in the remaining time.
Can I say
Yeah.
just quickly? So that's the reason actually why I think it was important for Gabriela to speak. I think somehow something that also important is to bring the OAD work within the undergraduate education. It's very important to have students already learning about this while they learn astronomy, both as Gabriela was saying, because this lacks completely, at least in the curriculum in Brazil somehow. It's not something that is not a course about this, something that might even exist in the future, I don't know. And also because then they will be, somehow facilitated to do this type of project when they will be researching.
Sorry, just to add a little, we face like a problem that is to bring, we aim our projects to the basic education, but our projects also could be directed to academic education. And it's hard to do this leap to the academic education, from the basic education to the academic education, because people don't embrace that much this idea on the, especially on science, on the science academic education, people don't embrace a lot this idea of multi-institutional projects related to underrepresented groups.
If I can ask Gabriela, how did you get to be involved in the science for development or in the work with Ariana? What motivated you? What attracted you?
Sorry, could you repeat, please?
How did you come to be involved in the project with Ariana?
How do I enter the project?
Yeah. What was your motivation, or how did you know about it?
Ariana promoted the first edition of the Orumbia project in the Observatorio during the pandemic, and they started, I don't know how to say that in English. I think it's, they planted like on the observatory, And she shared the pictures of the work with children's planning on the observatory, and I got interested in that because I like plants, and that's how I discovered the whole project.
Cool. Any of the projects want to give an answer? What are the challenges that you expect to face in this coming year? If anyone wants to, yeah.
Oh.
Hi.
Thank you very much. So my name is Luis. I'm from Timor-Leste. Thank you, Ariane and Gabriela, for seeing your video Aldea Favela. As Timor is a protected countries, it's good to learn from you. Firstly, let me introduce a bit about as an activity. Use the national components I was at the national.
I think you're struggling with this internet. Did you understand his question? No. Okay. Oh no, he's yeah. Okay.
I lost the connection. Connected. So, but basically, I'm not in Timor now. I'm in Cambodia. I would like to say our project in last 2 years, we've been working with the international community from UNESCO. We try to establish 10 laboratories for 10 municipalities. I know it's really hard to establish one laboratory for one schools. So we come up with the idea that we establish one laboratory in one municipality. So at least schools, teachers surrounded in the laboratory.
Okay, I'll ask him to maybe type his question in the chat or his comment. Okay, so before we close, I just want to remind people of two things. So all of you are running astronomy for development projects. That means all of you are basically eligible to submit abstracts for the OAD session at the IUGA. Joy, do you want to make a short pitch inviting people to submit abstracts?
Everyone is invited to please submit an abstract. The deadline is the 1st of March, and you can find more information on the AOD website. It's actually on the homepage. It's one of those things that slide sideways. They can just visit our website and you'll find more information about the OAD session there. Please submit an abstract.
So maybe also give them information on what the session is and what the GA is. I don't know if everyone knows.
So the OAD session will be looking at, now I have to open the page myself because I don't remember. It is focusing on the flagship projects that we have running at the OAD, but then we'll also have a session that focuses on, maybe looking for it. Oh yeah, it will also have a session that focuses on the synergies between natural and social sciences for the UN Sustainable Development Goals, as well as the OAD projects themselves, and also a session that covers the different IAU structures like the OAO, the OAE, as well as the OIA and CPS.
Thanks. Good. Maybe just add a link in the chat.
Yes.
I'll also send it by email. So the IU General Assembly, if you didn't know, is one of the largest astronomy conferences, one of the largest astronomy conferences globally. And this year in August, it will be happening in Cape Town, South Africa. first time in South Africa, first time in Africa, and we expect maybe 2,000 to 3,000 people in person, but also you're able to join online if you prefer. The abstract application, as Joy said, closes on the 1st of March, which is in a few days. There's also opportunity to apply for a grant. You can apply for a grant if you want to travel, if you want to cover your registration costs. Kevin? So Kevin, who's the director of the OAD, is also chair of the local national organizing committee that's organizing this in Cape Town. So Kevin will also say something.
Thanks, yeah, look, firstly, thanks very much everyone for your contributions. I think it's really good to have these sessions, and thanks, Ram, for organizing it. I think one of the things about having this IU General Assembly, for the first time on the African continent, it's also at the home of the OAD, and I think what we really want to do is to use the opportunity to showcase the all the projects, all the activities of the OAD to the rest of the international astronomy community. So it'll be really great to have you, at the OAD. And there's different ways that you can contribute. I mean, in the OAD session, but also, we have a suite of education outreach activities that are organized on the site. There's also going to be opportunity for you to interact with other people from across the world, but especially the African continent, and maybe share your expertise, share your experience in the way that you're doing now. I think that will help a lot in terms of just as Patricia says, if we want to use astronomy for a better world, we really need to reach audiences that we don't normally reach, and the types of engagements we want to have at the General Assembly also go beyond just the meeting itself and into the communities in Cape Town and the surrounding areas, reaching across the continent as well. There are, yes, the last thing I want to mention is that there are grants available. And so when you submit an abstract, you also have the choice to submit a grant application that will be for travel grants to help you to attend the meeting in Cape Town. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks, Kevin. So if there's nothing else, then that brings us to a close. Thank you for joining all 3 days. Like I said, all the recordings, all the slides will be online on the website. And some of you have, I think most of you have sent me your project plan. So let's try and finish them, refine them, and finalize them as soon as possible. And then, of course, you start implementing your projects. If there are no questions or final comments, then thank you, everyone. I will stop the recording.